Okay, welcome to this PowerPoint presentation on AC 1.2. It's describing the organisation of the criminal justice system in the UK, and in this one we're going to look specifically at the work of the police. So if we start by looking at the aims and objectives of the police, because later on in this course you're going to have to evaluate the effectiveness of the police. Do they or don't they do a good job? And obviously if you're going to evaluate, you need to know what their core purpose, what their aims and objectives are, so that you can then evaluate against those aims and objectives. And according to the Independent Committee of Inquiry into the Role and Responsibilities of the Police in 1996, these were the aims and objectives of the police. So the purpose of the police service is to uphold the law fairly and firmly, to prevent crime, to pursue and bring to justice those who break the law, to keep the Queen's peace, to protect, help, reassure the community, and to be seen to do this with integrity, common sense and sound judgment. So any evaluation you do on the police needs to bear in mind those key aims and objectives. Moving on. If we then start to summarise that, so the police are responsible for basically enforcing criminal law. They are usually the first agency to become involved once a person is suspected of committing a criminal offence. And their role is therefore to investigate the crime and in some cases charge the suspect. And investigating a crime may involve collecting evidence, arresting, detaining a suspect, questioning, obtaining statements from witnesses, suspects, etc., etc. And in minor cases, the police can also issue a caution or a fixed penalty notice, but in virtually all other cases, they send the case files to the Crown Prosecution Service, they make the decision, the Crown Prosecution Service, whether to prosecute or not. The exam requires you to know about funding. So 3 areas the police are funded by. So try and remember these because this question has come up a few times. So for 2022-23, total police budget £16.9 billion. Around 2/3 of that is funded by the central government. In other words, it's paid for by the taxpayer through income tax, etc. So 2/3 of that, but the other third is funded by council tax contributions, and it's also a small part of that third is for charging for some services like policing football matches. So if you're at Argyle and you see the police or the police horses, Argyle have paid the police to come to the football match and keep law and order, so the police will gain revenue from that. But so 2/3 from income tax, 1/3 from council tax contributions and from charges, but mainly it's from council tax contributions. Just to show you that, this is my council tax bill for this year, and you can see there that 11.3% of my council tax bill went on the police this year, £219.16, and that was a rise of 4.2%. So of my £1,925 of council tax, 219 of that is going towards the police. And you can go look at your parents' council tax bill and see how much they get charged. It differs from place to place and band to band. So there you go. So we now consider how the police force is made up. Well, there are 43 territorial police forces in England and Wales, the largest of which is the Metropolitan Police, with 32,954 police officers in it as of 2021. Plymstock, we are part of Devon and Cornwall Police, which has got 3,264 officers, and we're the 12th largest. Now, there are numerous special departments within the various forces, and each of those departments has its own specific role. Now, why am I referring to that? Well, because there's a really common exam question where candidates are asked to describe the role of the police. Sometimes, in fact quite usually, that's describe the role of the police and how those roles achieve social control. So in other words, how the police ensure that we abide by the law. And knowing some of the different departments and what they do makes it much easier to answer this question. So I'm quite unapologetically going to go through in quite detail those departments, and then I'm going to give you a summary right at the end if you get that sort of question. So let's have a look at this in more detail. So the bobby on the beat refers to just a policeman walking around the local area. Now that used to be the case all the time, but increasingly that's not the case anymore. It's still important that police are seen in your local area, but modern policing now has many diverse jobs and roles. So to give you some examples, there's CID, the Criminal Investigations Department. They deal with robberies, serious crimes, so robberies, burglaries, sexual offences, fraud, assaults, murders, etc. That's CID for you. Those people there are members of CID. You've got the NCA, who are the National Crime Agency, and their aim is to prevent and detect serious organised crime. So they embark on undercover work, physical, technical surveillance, witness protection, financial investigation, and there you've got some members of the NCA. Moving on, then we've got the drug squad. So whilst your NCA may deal with the large-scale drug trafficking, local forces will have squads that deal with drug offences in their area, so they'll survey local drug dealers, raid premises, etc, etc. You've got special branch, so drug squad there, special branch here. They deal with terrorism, with firearms, expensive explosives, threats to national security. And then down the bottom here, we've got the firearms branch, and each force will have a number of officers and a specialist team who are trained and equipped to participate and use firearms. We then move on to traffic. Traffic officers are concerned with all aspects of road safety, but they still get involved in policing all kinds of non-traffic accidents. So work of traffic officers is quite complex, so I've given a list of some of their duties. So they could deal with motorway pile-ups, road accidents. They'll check vehicles to ensure they are legally entitled to be on the road and they're safe. They'll deal with motoring offences such as speeding. They'll deal with breath testing, drink driving, drug driving offences. They'll manage traffic when a road's blocked by an incident or an accident. And they'll attend court to support a prosecution for hazardous driving, that sort of stuff. We then move on to the Royal and Diplomatic Branch. They have a slightly different colour police car, the Royal Diplomatic Branch. They're red. They are responsible for protecting members of the royal family, their residences, Prime Minister, embassies, diplomats, that sort of thing. You've got the dog handlers, and that again has a number of specialist roles. So dogs are trained to search for explosives, weapons, narcotics, to search for missing or injured people, to track and detain offenders who are running away from the police. So lots of different things there for the dog handlers, and they'll also locate dead bodies, blood that can be either buried underneath or on the surface. So quite a lot of different activities for dog handlers, depending on how the dog has been trained. And of course, drug sniffer dogs will be there in airports and for port control. When we've got the mounted police, horses are usually used by the police for crowd control, demonstrations, sporting events, etc. But actually, as well as imposing a police presence in disturbances such as riots, they will also be used in rural areas to search wide open spaces. If you think us down in here, Dartmoor, much easier to scour some of the wilder parts of Dartmoor on a horse than in a police car or on foot. So in rural areas, actually the role of a police horse is more diverse. That then leads us on to the river police. And if you're a force with lots of rivers or lots of coastal waters, Then you'll have a river police section, and they assist boats in difficulties. They inspect docks, riverside premises, etc. They deal with thefts from ships, houseboats, canal boats, riverside warehouses. They rescue people, sometimes retrieving bodies from the water. They'll make safe boats that are drifting or other objects that may cause hazard in the water. They monitor water pollution as well. And they also work with revenue and customs to counter smuggling, and also will search for suspects and criminals. So the key thing I'm trying to get over here is that different forces will also have different priorities, and that depends very much on location and demographics. So, someone like Devon with a big coastline, or Cornwall, will have a large river police force. London will have a river police force because the Thames is a big river with lots going on in it. But depending on your location, depending on your demographics, different police forces will have different forces within them that target different crimes. So, for instance, Devon and Cornwall police will target agricultural crime much more than the Met will, because the Met doesn't really have much agriculture going on in the middle of London. So this then leads us on to how the police link with other agencies within the criminal justice system. And again, you have to know this for the exam. So they work with the courts, because they will often appear in court giving evidence to the prosecution. They provide protection for vulnerable witnesses. They will hold defendants in police cells prior to them going to court. They transport defendants to and from court. In fact, nowadays it tends to be a private security company that does the transporting, but often the police will escort if it's a particularly important prisoner. They'll work with the Crown Prosecution Service to provide evidence for the prosecution of offenders. They'll charge offenders depending on what the CPS have told them to charge them with. They'll work with the Prison and Probation Service. They'll arrest prisoners who've been recalled to prison for breaching their licence, for instance. And as a result of Sarah's law, they'll work with the Prison and Probation Service to manage child sex offenders living in an area. And they'll also work with voluntary organisations to refer victims and witnesses to things like victim support, women's refuges, witness support, that sort of thing. So for my final slide, I talked about this common exam question where you get something like, in what ways do the police achieve social control? And we've looked at all those various roles within the police, and these are some of the things that I would pull together if I was trying to answer that sort of question. I could also get loads of other information on this, but I've just shortened it down for you. These are some of the things I pull in. There's much more you can do. So I would talk about how they're divided into different areas. Each area has its own budget, which means that they can target specific crimes that are linked to those areas, such agricultural crime in Devon and Cornwall, knife crime in inner cities. They monitor all criminal activity. They respond to emergency calls, which means that people feel safe, feel that they're being looked after. They provide a police service to the community by patrolling it. Their aim is to reduce crime, to make citizens feel safe. They work in partnership with other community organisations, such as schools, for instance. Many of you will have police officers coming to school to talk to you. They work with other support agencies in the criminal justice system, the courts, the probation services, just as I put on my previous slide. They'll investigate crime, they arrest, detain, question suspects according to the law. They will testify in court. We've got our neighbourhood policing, local areas with local bobbies that are linked to those areas. And of course, finally, the work of police community support officers, the PCSOs, who support police officers with their powers. And then you can bring in all the other stuff like firearms, CID, drugs, etc., to help you really pack out that answer. Hopefully that's made sense. And it's been of use, and I will see you soon for my next video. Take care.